This is episode 132 of The Variety Artist. This is John Abrams, your host, and that guy that interviews successful variety artists from around the world every single week. I'm glad to be back. I hope you enjoyed last week's interview with Lou E. Andrews. That was fantastic. Next week, we get to hear from Jessica Jane, one of the best magicians I've ever seen. Now, before we get into today's episode, I want to take a minute to tell you all about School of Astonishment. Yes, that's me. My Magic Academy has new classes starting in the middle of February that teach 8 traits of a true magician: being respectful, prepared, enthusiastic, confident, creative, authentic, and giving. Custom magic tricks shipped to your door with professional instruction by me. It's my mission to create more happiness in our kids and more empathy in the world. If you have a kid or kids that want to learn some magic and have some fun, shoot me out a message at john@thevarietyartist.com, and I'll be happy to tell you all about it. In today's show, you're going to meet one of the most iconic figures in body modification. You've definitely seen him on one of his many TV appearances, and maybe even seen him live, or at least a statue of him. Together, we're going to learn all about what it's like to be human. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
He's a pioneering figure in body modification and modern sideshow. He's appeared on hundreds of TV shows worldwide. He's a Guinness World Record holder, and Ripley's Believe It or Not has installed statues of him in their museums worldwide. Variety artists, I give you Lizardman.
Yay!
What's going on? I'm glad to have you on here, my friend.
I'm glad to be on. It's nice to be doing something. 10 months into quarantine, it's got to have something to break it up.
Yeah, what else do you have to do, huh?
Right. I tend to sit around and just do since I don't have to do breakdowns of any business, any shows I've done or anything like that, or any numbers there. I just sort of break down the numbers and go, oh, so I've done 2% of the traveling I would normally do in a calendar year. Hey, look at this, honey. I normally spend $12,000 on airline tickets this year. Oh yeah. $2,000. That's
yeah. I do the same thing. Last year, I did 100 shows in 2 months.
right.
Last summer. And this summer I looked and I was like, oh, I did 2. Congratulations.
Before I went into quarantine back on, it was March 17th. I actually flew back. It's my dad's birthday. It's an easy one to remember. I flew back as we had just closed the Adelaide Fringe Fest down in Adelaide, Australia. So I was really lucky that I got in well over 100 shows during the course of that 5 weeks, and we did a full festival run. It was very successful, but it ended on that down note of we all knew we were leaving to the unknown, shut down for the 14th time.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm usually looking at the worst case scenario, and I'm that guy being like, hey, don't get your hopes up too soon. But even I didn't foresee it going this long, and really now I'm kind of looking at when are we going to get out of this mess.
And I was just watching on TV. We had, I think, in the United States, 2,000 deaths today. Not to start this podcast off on a nice, happy note.
My wife is a nurse. Like, this is in my face every day.
It's a crazy thing.
I remember at the end of the festival, I was actually telling like some of our younger performers and stuff, we were like, they're just getting started. I'm like, man, this sucks. You're literally in your first, second year of performing. You're literally hand to mouth, and then it gets shut down. This will be your Great Depression.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Imagine people starting out in January or February.
Yeah.
Just starting out. Hey, this is what it's always like.
The Adelaide Festival, which is one of my favorite festivals in the year. I've been doing it for 9 years now. And I know people that were in this situation. They just spent the last several years working the festival as a street performer, saved the money up and gotten it together. Like they rented a tent, they did a venue. This is their first big thing. And it was kicking off their year, right? This is going to be the year for their new theater show, which is now non-existent.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into all your fair festivals and all the different things, kind of describe yourself. People are listening to this in their car. They're just listening to this, and it's not visual. So describe what's going on.
Well, what I've had done, I've basically had my entire body tattooed, top to bottom, head to toe, face included, with green reptilian scales and black markings. In addition to the tattoos that cover my body, I've had subdermal implants, Teflon pieces grafted to my forehead, right over my eyes to give me horned ridges. My teeth have been filed down to sharp points using a dental drill, and my tongue was split in two, bifurcated with a biopsy laser back in 1997.
Oh my gosh. Well, what started this whole adventure?
Well, it's actually, for me, it's a culmination of a lot of different ideas coming together and a lot of different processes. The typical question that I get about it is people often think like, oh, I woke up one day and went, hey, I'm going to be Lizardman. And I'm like, nah, nothing, it doesn't work that way. Nothing in life works that way. It's not a movie. Even if I said I woke up one day and decided I'm going to be a doctor, I'm like, now there's usually more to it, right?
Yeah.
When I was younger, I always had an interest in arts. And I mean, there were some signs early on when I was a kid. There are some kids that draw on paper, some kids that draw on the walls, and some kids that draw on themselves. It's pretty easy to guess which kind of kid I was. I drew on myself a lot. And even before I got out of elementary school, I tended to be towards more performance and unusual things. I liked living statues. I liked the idea of it conceptually. I liked body painting, costumes. As I developed as a person and an artist, and these ideas grew, they started to intermingle with other influences I had, like circus and sideshow. And I knew about the history of the tattooed man as an attraction, and got more and more interested in it. So by the time I got to college, I was a philosophy major with a minor in performance art. What I wanted to do was I came up with this conceptual idea about transforming my body. Mm-hmm. What's the idea of being human? A human is how the term is applied. The idea became interesting to me to play with this idea. Like at a certain point, I'm bringing together all these different ideas and influences like circus and sideshow and tattooing and body modification. Pulling this together, I started to think about this idea of how is the term human applied? I was doing linguistic philosophy, and in that sort of realm, you think about a term, what a term is, by how the language using community would use it. If I point to something and say, what is that? And they say human. I say, okay, well, what makes that a human being? Mm-hmm. They could list off a number of different criteria. There's a weird separation there, though, right? Where that's, I think a lot of people would agree, like technically to be human, you need a certain number of chromosomes, certain biological things that you can't tell just by looking at something, right? You need like actual lab analysis to prove that it's human. It could be a very cleverly disguised alien, or whatever the situation might be. So that's the idea for me, is to separate myself, to look different, to behave differently enough. My humanity comes into question. Like, will people literally look at me and go, oh yeah, human being? Or will they go, hey, is that a person? It's very student artish stuff. I'm the first to admit that, but hey, I was a student artist. That's when I came up with it.
That's very cool. When did you say, well, I'm going to do this transformation project? What was the first tattoo, or what was the first modification that you had?
I look at modification very, very broadly. To me, haircuts, manicures, pedicures, wearing clothes, these are all body modifications. These are all modifications you make to your body, albeit not necessarily as permanent as something like a piercing or a tattoo, implants, or surgeries. So in terms of what most people think of modifications, piercing my ears would be the first thing that happened.
I guess that would be a permanent modification. In fact, I've had that. I have one ear pierced.
It's permanent enough. I mean, it can grow closed, right? But mine have also stretched out kind of large, so it's unlikely they would ever close up again. Now, when I first pierced it, I was just your basic, typical punk kid literally shoving safety pins through my ears. Mm-hmm. Now, I would do it to shock people. I'd do it to get a rise out of people or to entertain somebody, be at a party. See, I'd be like, hey, watch this. Some I would keep, some I didn't. I eventually settled down to 2 piercings in my lobes, which I ultimately stretched and conditioned for weight. My world record stands at 16 kilos lifted and helicopter spun with a keg from my earlobes for a Guinness.
Wait, back up. That's a Guinness Book of World Record. You hung how much weight? 16 pounds, was it?
16 kilos.
Oh,
16 kilos. So a little over 30 pounds. It's been a signature stunt for me for years. And it's one of those things that, nobody else has really done, I think, partially. And I appreciate this out of respect for the fact that it's been, my thing for 20 some odd years. Historically, a lot of other circus performers I've talked to is like, of all the pierce lifters that, did anybody ever just do these spins? And the answer is generally no. And there's a good reason for that, is that it does add a lot of extra pressure. With the ears, it was easier for me to build up. When I was trying to do it with my nipples, it very often would shift the weight and I would get small tears and be really, really uncomfortable. Guinness very nicely gave me my act as a world record. So heaviest act lifted and spun by the earlobes, 16 kilos. At the time that I did it, it was more than the amount of weight that it was the current record for the heaviest lifted. So it was technically that one as well. But I think that one has been broken since.
And do you do something like that in your act now?
Yeah, I mean, Pierce weightlifting has been part of my show for basically almost the entirety of my career. I had it in, I think my very first show, I lifted a folding chair with my ears. So yeah, it's been there since the beginning, back in '96.
Okay, in addition to that, what does a Lizardman show look like?
Well, these days, a Lizardman show, I typically tend to work now as a member of a cast, like a guesting in with someone else's show or like rotating in like that.
Mm-hmm.
For most of my career, I have done solo my own full-length shows, which could be 90 minutes, 2 hours or longer. But now what you typically come and see me do is an act. And I have what I sort of think of as my standard cabaret bar act, my quick 5, 10, or 15 minutes. That, of course, can be shorter or longer depending on what stunt to get added in. But I have a little bit where I come out and I introduce everybody, and kind of like we went over before, I tell everyone what I've done to my body, give them a little look at it, show them where the implants are on my forehead, show them my sharp teeth, maybe bite into a beer can.
Okay.
I would do that as a thing to show how sharp my teeth are. I can literally puncture the side of a beer can and shotgun it.
That's kind of cool.
Of course, I have my 4 famous tongue tricks. I've devised 4 basic movements that the human tongue can do once it's been bifurcated, and I run the audience through them and all of their benefits. And after that, I'll usually share with them a couple of classic sideshow stunts. One of my favorites may be sword swallowing, could be a version of the human blockhead, could be one of my own stunts like the cranial corkscrew, a giant corkscrew that I thread through my skull.
Wait. What is that? What's the cranial corkscrew?
Cranial corkscrew is a giant corkscrew, the tip of which goes into my nose. And then as I turn the handle, it passes through my nasal passage, down the back of the sinus cavity, down the back of the throat, comes out the mouth, and completely transverses my skull. It follows the same path that my old trained snake Cricket used to when she would crawl through my head.
Well, there's a few things I wanted to talk to you about today. Right. First, of course, the body modification thing, but I also wanted to talk to you about your act, but I also wanted to talk to you about your ferrets.
Yeah, ferrets.
You have or had ferrets?
We have, my wife and I right now have 2 ferrets, 2 boys. We have Nibbler and Oso. Over the years, we've had 15 ferrets, including those 2 boys. So we started she started before me. Before I met my wife, she had a ferret named Dervish. Mm-hmm. When we got together and I moved in with her, just before we moved in together, she rescued another ferret that we named Eris. So we had Dervish and Eris when we first moved in together. Fozzie. Then we got Ginsu, Houdini, Illigor, Jezebel, Kabuki, Luna, Mojo, Molotov, Nilbog, Nibbler, who's still with us, Oso, and Puka.
I had 2 ferrets in my whole life. And I got them because my daughter said, Dad, I want a ferret, because she had seen somebody walking a ferret on a leash at a park. And she ended up talking to him. So we ended up getting 2 ferrets, and I do magic with live animals is one of the things that I do. So I had this great idea that I would put one of the ferrets in my show. So I put one of the ferrets in my show, and the finale of this particular trick was a ferret would appear actually inside the shirt of one of my volunteers. Well, what I didn't realize is that when ferrets clamp down, when they bite, and they clamp down, they lock their jaw.
Yeah, like a pit bull or like a tegu monitor.
Yeah, and what I didn't realize is that this particular ferret really liked that little flap on the back of your arm. You know, that little flap of skin back there? And so sure enough, he appears in one of my volunteer shirts and then clamps down on that little skin on the back of his arm and just hung there.
Yep.
For the longest time, like hypnotized.
Illigor was our boys. He loved bras. So he would go up girls' shirts and then he would bite their bra. He would try to pull the bra off them. He would clamp down on the bra and you try to pull him out of the shirt and he'd be pulling the bra off. He'd tug it at it really bad. So when I was on tour doing the Jägermeister music tour and people would throw bras on stage, I would collect them. Yeah, thanks, guys. And then later on, put up the pictures on the internet of my ferret playing with them.
All right, well, let's talk about your tongue. I got to talk about your tongue.
Well, my tongue's plural, technically.
Yeah, I guess so, huh?
Yeah.
Your tongue is, what do you say, bifurcated? Is that what you call
Bifurcated. Yep. Bifurcated. Fancy way of saying split in 2.
Right. And both sides move individually. Isn't that right?
Right. Once it's actually healed and the swelling goes down, individual control is pretty easy to come by with just a little bit of practice.
Now, before you had that done, I mean, you make your living talking and performing.
Right.
Weren't you concerned that maybe it might affect your speech?
Where I had it done in 1997. So at that point in my life, I was at a place where I was actually very willing to accept going silent. It's funny to say it back then because it's a complete 180. Yeah. Now, I mean, a lot of my work is as an MC, is as a talker, whether it be, inside, outside, whatever, as a presenter or a host. So yeah, talking is everything. But back then I was ready to go full mime.
Wow. Well, so what hurt the most? Was it the tongue or was it something else?
For me, the most pain I've ever felt as a result of something I've done voluntarily and on purpose, and pretty much beats out the involuntary and accidents as well, is my implants.
Oh, the forehead ones or something else?
Yeah, the forehead. Yeah, those are the only implants I have, are the ones on my forehead. And it was a 6-hour procedure. It was done without anesthetic. It's the only time I've ever hallucinated and vomited from pain.
That doesn't sound like fun at all.
The question is, of course, was it worth it? Right? To me, at 100%, it's absolutely been worth it.
Well, it really looks amazing.
Oh, I mean,
I guess my question was, did you know beforehand that it would hurt that much?
I didn't know that it would hurt I think it hurt more than I expected. They tried really hard. The person who did it for me and like friends I knew who had them really did try to give me like a good forewarning. They didn't sugarcoat it. What I actually was told was, wherever you get an implant, it's going to feel like you got hit with a baseball bat. Now, I'd never been hit in the forehead with a baseball bat before, but when I was 17 in gym class in a floor hockey match, I had a hockey stick broken over my forehead and had to get a ridiculous amount of stitches across it to put it back together. So I had that as a background experience, and this was worse because it didn't heal as fast. It's not just how much it hurts, but for how long it hurts.
How long did it hurt?
That first week is just a blur of pain. The swelling was massive. There was no detail. It just smoothed. I had a caveman forehead, and both my eyes were completely black, like raccoon eyes, from the bruising and the blood vessels bursting.
Oh my gosh. What is Lizard Skinnered?
Lizard Skinnered was a musical project. I have a good friend, Mossy Vaughn, was a member of a band called the Hevels that played on the Jägermeister music tour with us. That's how I first got to meet Mossy. He eventually and his wife ended up driving one of the PR vehicles, one of the decked out Jägermeister RVs that would kind of follow us around on tour and be a mobile billboard. And so he and I worked for years together on those tours. And he was always saying that, I needed a band. And I've always been one to sort of, try to recognize my own limitations. And I'm like, look, if there's an area of performing where it's just not my forte, it's music. Physical stunt work, things like that. There's other stuff I think I have some actual skills at, but I've just never felt very musically inclined.
Yeah.
He got together the right people, put together some really good music, and we just kind of went at it from a spoken word perspective, which is something that I have done before in like Reader's Theater. I look at Lizard Skinner as a bunch of very talented musicians being kind enough to let me talk over their fine work.
I just love the name Lizard Skinner. That's great.
I think the name is why it happened, because Mossy was kind of joking around with me with different stuff. At one point, one of us blurted that out, and we were like, "Okay, fine, we've got to do it then."
That's it. All right, we're gonna move on to fact or something John just made up. Sound like fun?
All right, sounds fun.
Is it fact? Or is it something John just made up?
Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to say a headline, and you're going to tell me whether it's true or not. And if it is true, tell me a little more about it.
All right,
here we go. Growing up, his family raised Siberian Huskies, and Lizardman was a dog sled racer.
That is true. I raced dogs at the Tupper Lake dog sled track as a kid. My dad ran I think it was a 16 dog team. I'm not sure exactly. I know that at our largest, we had 23 Siberian Huskies.
Wait, where are you living at the time?
Oh, we were living. I grew up primarily in Clinton County, New York. It's the northernmost county.
Okay.
Borders Quebec. If there's any place up there that anyone has heard of, it's either Dannemora or Plattsburgh. So I was 30 miles northwest of Plattsburgh. You could literally, within a couple of hours, just walk out the back door of the house I grew up in, and you could walk into Canada. I grew up in a log cabin in a pine forest next to a swamp. My dad and my granddad built the log cabin with trees that were felled off the property.
Wow.
We were up there, and yeah, so winter's a big thing. Not only did I race sled dogs, we would actually take the dog sled to school. The school where my mom and dad worked.
But wait, by taking the dog sled, you mean you used to ride the dog sled to school?
In fact, it was a big thing when I was in school. I remember my dad, every year they'd pick like one day, and it was basically dog sled day. One at a time, different classrooms would get to come out, and he'd take them for a ride around the playground. It's all covered in snow. We was in the middle of winter, obviously. For all the other kids, that was, oh boy, we get to ride the dog sled. For me, that was the day that, I got to spend all day helping my dad give kids dog sled rides.
That's so cool. All right, next one. Here we go. In junior high, Lizardman's goal was to become a stockbroker and retire by 30.
Absolutely true. Hey, I was growing up in the 80s, and I caught the Wall Street fever a little bit. I was an impressionable kid. I was almost American Psycho. That was almost my career path. It kind of got to the point where I was in junior high. That was if you'd asked me when I was in 7th or 8th grade what I wanted to do, and I was like, yeah, I was gonna go make millions of dollars in the stock market.
I think you should walk in there right now. That would be awesome.
Somewhere around there, I think what happened was girls took over all my thinking, and when I finally snapped out of it, I had grown a conscience or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that happens, doesn't it, as we're growing up?
Yeah.
Number 3, here we go. Lizardman's likeness is replicated in wax at Madame Tussauds.
That is not true.
Not yet.
That's not true. Yeah, not represented in wax at Madame Tussauds, but I am represented in some form of resin. I'm not sure exactly what they used for those statues, but some form of resin statue in every one of the Ripley's Believe It or Not museums around the world.
Oh,
no matter
wow.
where you go, there I am.
This isn't one of the questions, and this isn't even a fact or anything, but the branding for Lizardman is so awesome. I've interviewed now 130 some odd people, and you could look down that list, and there are big names and there are people that you know. But if you look down that thing, you go, oh, Lizardman, I know who that is, even if you don't know who you are. That's so cool.
I said years and years ago, fear the power of my media whoring. It's a testament to, if you are willing to do any gig, anytime, anywhere, eventually you will sort of saturate out there and get that. I mean, obviously Ripley's is the big driving force behind that for me.
Yeah.
I had a fair amount of basic cable and good talk show success under my belt in the late 90s. But in 2000, when that TV show broke, I don't know if they tell everybody this or whatever, but I mean, I was repeatedly told that my episode rated, the highest throughout the seasons for the favorites. I was voted the highest in their fan polls online for the longest time. When they did the statue of me, that was a real risk. They had never done a living person before. It was kind of their policy, because there are so many possible illegal entanglements and
Sure.
the likeness issues and all of that. But, they did it, and it worked out so well with mine that it went out. It opened the door for them to do it with other people.
Wow.
It keeps me alive, because that's what I always looked at Ripley's as being about. When they first contacted me, when I was over to me, I was still a little kid fan in my head in 1999. Like, oh my God, the Ripley's Believe It or Not, completely fanboyed out in the moment of shooting those segments and then watching them air. And then to hear 40 million people watched it, I try and wrap my head around that, because I think about the largest crowd I've ever stood in front of was doing a festival intro set in front of 60,000 people. And that was unreal. I could not physically actually see them all.
I think probably the most I've ever performed in front of is 2,000. So 60,000 is a lot. 40 million it's unfathomable.
Yeah, and that's why like 60,000 is unreal to look at in real time. So you try to imagine 40 million people. They couldn't be in one place, right? That's several cities worth of people.
Yeah.
It becomes that thing too. And because it's far reaching, I never truly appreciated the power of media. And the idea of doing something just to get on TV. Now I understand why that's a bad idea because I've had enough experience in the industry and other things. But I didn't realize, before when I sort of thought like, why would somebody do that just to get on TV? I didn't realize exactly how powerful getting on TV can be. Now I know.
Yeah. Did your career just explode?
It wasn't so much an explosion, but there was a change, right? Like the biggest single change, the one that was sort of immediately noticeable is the recognizability, right?
Mm-hmm.
I immediately went from being, what's that tattooed guy doing here to, hey, it's that guy.
Oh,
That it's a sea change of attitude. Because once you've been on TV, everybody assumes he's on TV, he must be doing all right.
right.
I mean, that ultimately becomes a problem later on. People assume that you're doing much better because it's very easy to get famous and much harder to get paid for it, right?
Right.
So yeah, people start to assume things that aren't true. I had a friend writing for a comedy blog that was doing some research on celebrity net worth. They put my name in, and the site said that I'm worth $53 million.
You're like, thank you.
Yeah, where's the other $52.5 million? And why did I never see it? And it's only because I bought a house in Austin early on, and the real estate market is what it is here, that it's even that. That's most of that's the value of my house. The record, it travels, so it's like that does translate into me being able to go, and has gotten me pretty much anywhere I've wanted to go in the world, because everybody wants their Lizardman moment. I'm a living photo op.
And a podcast op.
Yeah, there you go.
In fact, I've had a lot of people here that have been on, what are the big ones? Penn and Teller.
Yep.
America's Got Talent. Their careers did explode for about 6 months.
We all have to learn this lesson. If you're lucky enough in this business, you get to learn the lesson that a moment is exactly that. It's a moment, right? When you're on top of the world in that moment, when you're the most important thing in the world, when those 40 million people are watching you, when those 2,000 people are screaming your name and chanting for your finale, whatever, that's the biggest thing ever. But as soon as that moment is over, it's over.
Right.
It's so what? I could sit here, right, and list every TV show I did. All the big 20 years ago. So what?
Yeah, I was really famous for a short while.
And then again, like I say, if you're lucky enough to get the chance to learn the lesson and you learn it, you make a career out of stringing moments together without ever destroying yourself to get one or because you lost one. Right. Either you take them in stride a little bit better, and you recognize where it's like, hey, sometimes being in front of 2,000 people is actually better than being in the 40 million, right? I get paid more for doing a festival where we're just a walk-by attraction, right? I'm basically doing almost street theater type of stuff. I could make more money there than I would on almost every TV appearance I've done in my history. But it's not the glory shot, right? In fact, I'm trying to remember who told me this years ago in the circus. One guy said, yeah, you do American TV to brag to your family. You go overseas and do theater to make money. Although
TV nowadays, you can put it on your website. That does help a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all useful, right? Every drop in the bucket is a drop in the bucket.
All right. We'll get off that and we'll get to our last one. Last question. You ready?
Ready.
This is a fact or something John just made up. Okay. Lizardman coached a women's rugby team.
That is absolutely true.
Okay, that's too crazy for me to make up. So what's the deal with that?
So I was a rugby player in college. I actually, when I was a senior in high school, I had a student teacher who was a rugby player from the local state college. And he taught a few of us the rules to rugby and told us about it. So I was really excited when I got to join my college rugby team. I joined, I played for 4 years, had a great time. Like really, I loved the sport. I really got into it. I really loved being a rugby player, the team, the camaraderie, playing. It's just really enjoying it. Right after I graduated, I moved back up with a couple of friends I graduated high school with, and we were living in Plattsburgh, New York. I was living with two guys, Alan and Paul, and Alan and I ended up coaching the women's rugby team.
Wait, not Alan and Paul. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going through this memory myself now to pull out more details for that. So essentially, we meet girls from the Plattsburgh State women's rugby team, and one was like, "Yeah, we really need a coach. We don't, have anybody really knows what they're doing to watch us and teach us plays and whatever." So we just kind of, by the seat of our pants, did it, and we put them onto a winning season within one season.
Wow!
We had them winning games. We had them doing really well, and it was actually a great deal of fun. Did it for a year and a half before I went back to school, went back to grad school and started playing again myself. And in fact, I was playing rugby up through 98. Basically, when I got my implants, that was the end of my rugby.
What would happen?
If I cracked it, it would be bad for me and whoever ran into them.
Yeah.
The skin is so thin that it would probably crack open.
That was fact. Or something John just made up.
All right, I'll let you go at that. Before I let you go, actually, do you have any social media or anything you want to plug before I let you go?
The main thing that I'm plugging these days is buy my book. I got a book on Amazon. It's a Kindle edition of a series of essays I wrote when I was writing for a body modification website in the early 2000s. I then went back and sort of redid each one of them when I put the book out in 2010, and now I'm doing that again. So now's the perfect time. If you get the Kindle edition in about 2 weeks, it's going to get updated, and that's going to happen on, I'm looking at probably about a monthly schedule. It's going to be new content, new never before published photos, and a whole bunch of stuff added to the book as I get the time and this quarantine continues.
And what is the name of that book?
That book is Once More Through the Modified Looking Glass.
Once More Through the Modified Looking Glass.
Yep. You can find a link to it on thelizardman.com. That'll take you to the Amazon page. Grab it for Kindle and hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure we will.
There you go.
Well, thanks for joining me today. That was fun.
Hey, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. And for all my variety artists, if you want your kids to have more confidence and get their noses out of that phone, have them join my magic classes. I have brand new classes starting in the middle of February. Just shoot me out a message at john@thevarietyartist.com. Tell me you'd like to register your kids, and I'll give you a huge discount. Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.